Welcome to the podcast on Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika Darshana. We will begin by examining Nyaya's criticism of Buddhism and Sāṅkhya. First, about Buddhists. Now, as per the Nyayiks, the Buddhists upset all common sense notions about substance and attribute. That by substance and attribute, they mean that there is this thing which has qualities about cause and effect, that is causal inference and all those sorts of things, about permanence of things. Now, as per the Nyayiks, Buddhists claim that all collocations are momentary. That is, any group of elements, when they come, they exist only for a moment and then they vanish. And second, that what we call as substance is just a temporary collection of elements, right? Let's say we take milk pot, for example. It's not a substance that endures. Milk pot is just a momentary configuration of dharmas, momentary configuration of elements, events, or qualities. And the third being that causation is explained through collocations. That is, let's say curd. Curd forms from milk, right? So, curd occurs when a specific set of conditions or elements come together in just the right way. It is there is no enduring substance. There is only this coordinated arrival of these causal factors. Now, this rejects the Nyaya's view, which is very commonsensical in nature, that that substance are enduring, basically, that they have that the enduring substance have certain qualities. Nyaya's basic objection is against the collocation problem. Nyaya's first objection, it is very simple if you follow the reasoning. Take the example of milk turning into curd. For curd to be produced, there is a causal collocation of many factors. Milk, certain temperature needs to be there, bacteria, which we know currently is the lactobacillus. According to the Buddhists, all these elements are momentary, kshanik. That means at any given moment, even the collocation which forms from these elements is momentary. That is, it exists only for that moment and then it disappears. Now, Nyaya says if the collocation is momentary, it appears only that very moment, right? But for an effect to be produced, this collocation must persist at least till the next moment. Then only would it exercise the causal influence. It shouldn't be the case that a collocation is existing only for that moment, because that would render causal influence impossible. So, if the causal collocation is destroyed in the very moment in which it arises, how can it produce an effect in the subsequent moment? Now, two arguments can be made here. If you say that it produces the effect in the exact moment when it has occurred, then at the very moment the collocation comes into picture, the effect must be there. But in that case, cause and effect would coincide, and then the idea of production makes no sense at all. But if you say no, that is, effect uh, is not produced at that moment, it is produced in the next moment. But then, on the one hand, you claim momentariness, kshanikvad, that according to that collocation, uh, that that should produce the collocation that should produce has already ceased to exist, because that collocation existed only for a moment. So how can a non-existent cause, the cause which has ceased to exist, the cause which has already ended, how can it produce an effect? So These are the arguments made by Nyayiks against the Buddhists. So, for Nyayiks, ordinary experience suggests that there is enduring reality. It's not the case that reality is just, fleeting moments. And the causal factors have to persist long enough to interact and bring about change. And this is used to attack the Buddhist doctrine of Khanikatva, that is momentariness. Now, what do Nikes think on ordinary perception versus momentariness? Nikes also appeal to experience. That is, primacy should be given to how we experience things. How do we experience things? We experience things as continuing in time. For example, we see a certain object now and we see it later. And we claim that, okay, this is the same object we had seen earlier. And we also perceive three times, let's say past, present, and future, in a sort of unified way. We say that this is the same object I saw last year, let's say, or last day. Or I will, use this object. I will use this chair tomorrow. The Buddhists have to treat these, as illusions created by momentary flashes. But Nyayiks treat these as enduring. That since our experience presents us with enduring entities, these are not instantaneous events. So they appeal to experience and thus reject the Buddhist notion that that contradicts the kshanikatva, which contradicts things that are given in everyday perception. Now we move to Nyaya's criticism of Sāṅkhya. Now, Sāṅkhya, what does Sāṅkhya think of causation? Sāṅkhya thinks that there is a concept called Satkaryevad. That is, effect pre-exists in the cause. The causal entity, which is Prakriti or some state, it already has in itself all future effects in some potential form. And causation is just the actualization of that potential, right? So, not that anything new is there in the cause, just it is the actualization of the potential which is already inherent in the state. And the cause transforms into the effect. A lump of clay becomes a pot, and the pot was already there, it was latent in the clay. This is called transformation or parinam. So, the effect, they deny that effect is a new entity produced, right? And Nyaya's objection is basically that Nyaya propounds a Satkaryevad. Nyaya says that if we say that effect is simply a manifested state of the cause, it does not simply explain why any change should happen at all. If all the possible effects are already there in the latent form, no real entity is produced, what is the role of this causal activity? And why do we see a particular effect now and not any other latent one, right? And so we need a reason why anything happens here and now. And Nyaya makes the point, whether you say the effect is something absolutely new, or let's say you say that effect was already present in the cause, you still need a proper reason, you still need a causal connection and activity. Sankhya does not explain it. So Nyaya accuses Sankhya that, Sankhya, you only do empty metaphysical talk. You don't explain, and you don't explain causation that well in the sense. So, and Sankhya also has a distinction, right? Which is the material cause, which is the Prakriti, or Prakriti is a substrate that transforms, and the instrumental causes, which are like the potter's stick or wheel in the pot example, right? pot forming from the clay, potter's stick, the role of wheel, etc. Nyaya criticizes that Sāṅkhya claims that instrumental causes they do not produce anything new. They just help reveal the pre-existing effect or satkarya. For Nyayiks, this underestimates the efficacy of the instrumental causes. That is, Sankhya doesn't tell whether there is any role or efficacy of those causes or not. They really produce a new arrangement. According to Nyayiks, the instrumental causes, they produce a new arrangement and they bring something new into existence. And Sankhya says things like every moment, from how the events unfold. Prakriti, then Mahat, then Ahankar, then Tanmatra, then Bhutas. So, this is how the events unfold. And Nyaya says that, okay, you are positing a whole metaphysical order and machinery, but how do these cause effects relations work? That you're not explaining. So, and then Sankhya's view of Buddhi, Purusha, and experience is also critiqued. Now, Sankhya says that Buddhi is a product of Prakriti. It is non conscious or Jad in itself. Purush is pure consciousness, but Purush is also utterly passive. Purush does not act, it merely illuminates. And how does experience arise then? Experience arises because Buddhi reflects Purusha like a mirror. And this reflectivity, it makes Buddhi appear conscious, infuses consciousness into the Buddhi. And Purusha mistakenly identifies with the modifications of the Buddhi. This leads Purusha to thinking, I am happy, or these experiences are mine, I see, etc. What does Nyaya critique about it then? That, this whole business of calling Buddhi non intelligent is absurd, right? Because, knowing, feeling, or willing, these how can something that is non-intelligent do all of these intelligent acts like knowing, feeling, willing? And the reflected consciousness story also is not very convincing to Nyayiks. That this whole business is very complicated, that Purusha's consciousness is reflected in Buddhi and it somehow bounces back. This is a very unnecessary complication. Then, if Purush is entirely inactive, then how does it ever get liberated? You know, uh, uh, s- Now Sankhya says that Purush is bound. Why is it bound? It is due to ignorance, and it is liberated due to discriminative knowledge. That is, if you have Vivek, the Purush will get, you know, uh, liberated. But if Purush is very passive, it can neither be ignorant nor can it learn. So everything has to occur in Buddhi, right? So how can Purush get liberated at all? On one hand, you are saying it is bound due to ignorant. You also posit a way for it to get liberated, but on the other hand, you also say that it is passive. So how does Nyaya seek to resolve this issue? They say that Atman or a self is something which is a real, it is an enduring substance. It is genuinely conscious. It is capable of consciousness via contact with mind or senses. Atman is the subject of knowledge, pleasure, pain, effort. It is not just a passive witness. So, that this is the whole criticism of Sankhya, that that Sankhya's division between Buddhi, which is very passive, which is very inert, and Purusha again, Buddhi, which is inert, and Purusha, which is, very passive. It does not fit our lived experiences of, how we think, how we will, how we are responsible.